was in a Russian prison. You would think that somebody who is now free, back in America on home soil, would not have too much to complain about, especially something like this. Fans in every sport. She described the fans.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what sport you are. It doesn't matter what sport you pick. That's how fans act in every arena.
Brittney Griner is no stranger to controversy, but the storm she's caught in now is on an entirely different level. For years, whispers have circled online claiming Griner might not be biologically female. Those rumors were mostly kept to fringe forums, ignored by mainstream media, until now, because after her recent comments about race, fan behavior, and Caitlin Clark, those claims are back in the spotlight, and this time, they're being addressed head-on by people with real platforms, including Stephen A. Smith. Let's be honest, this conversation is radioactive. No one wants to be the first to say it out loud, but it's been bubbling under the surface for years. From her voice, to her physique, to a resurfaced Instagram video where she appears shirtless, people have been pointing to what they call inconsistencies in Griner's biology. The video, still up, still circulating, and while platforms like Instagram are usually strict about topless content, hers stayed live for over a year, sparking theories that even AI moderation systems didn't recognize her as female. Now normally, you'd write this off as classic internet conspiracy, but when Brittney Griner inserted race and victimhood into a conversation about crowd noise, of all things, it reignited the fire. Because if you're going to publicly accuse fans of light racism just for cheering at a basketball game, people are going to start asking bigger questions about who's allowed to say what and why. And that's exactly what happened. Stephen A. Smith didn't tiptoe around it. He called it what it was, a total overreach, not just because of the crowd noise comment, but because of the hypocrisy behind it. Here's someone who was literally freed from a Russian prison thanks to a US government negotiation that involved trading an international arms dealer. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. Brittney Griner got a second chance most people could only dream of. And what does she do with it? Accuse American fans of racism for being loud at a basketball game. That's when the internet turned fast.
An arms dealer that wanted to kill American citizens, according to the reports. That's who they let out for her. You would think that you would be smiling, you would be ecstatic, you would be happy, and something like this wouldn't faze you at all. The fact that it does is disturbing. I'll leave it at that.
It wasn't just the crowd comment anymore. People started pulling receipts, the old videos, the AI theory, the medical speculation. Sports forums blew up with frame-by-frame breakdowns of Griner's build. Was this fair? Maybe not, but that's what happens when someone throws out wild accusations. They open the door to scrutiny. And here's the twist. The louder Griner's defenders try to shut down these conversations, the more fuel they add to the fire. When people are told, you're not allowed to ask that, they dig deeper. They start wondering, what are we not being told? So now this isn't just about one player's bad take. It's about trust. It's about the integrity of women's sports. It's about how far leagues are willing to go to protect certain identities, even at the cost of fairness, transparency, and accountability. And while the media stays silent, hoping it blows over, Stephen A. put it on blast. And Griner? She didn't respond with facts. She responded with outrage. Brittney Griner could have stayed quiet. She could have let the rising fan energy roll on, but instead she picked the worst possible hill to die on, accusing WNBA crowds, many of them brand new fans brought in by Caitlin Clark, of racial bias. In a recent interview, Griner described the change in WNBA arenas as disruptive. She talked about how the vibe used to be more relaxed, almost like a casual cafe. But now, it's loud, it's emotional, it's filled with energy, and somehow that became a problem. She singled out a father and daughter in the crowd, saying she couldn't tell exactly what they were shouting, but it felt like their excitement was either about my performance or some light racism. Let that sink in. A professional athlete playing in front of paying fans in a sport begging for attention, heard a family cheering and jumped straight to racial motivations. Not because of what was said, not because of any slur, but because their enthusiasm made her uncomfortable. Sports are built on noise. Home crowds roar, away crowds heckle. That's the culture. That's the energy. That's part of what makes professional competition real. But for Griner, fan passion wasn't fuel. It was a threat, and instead of brushing it off or addressing it with maturity, she framed it as systemic racism. That was the moment everything shifted. Stephen A. Smith saw right through it. He didn't mince words, didn't sugarcoat it, and didn't backpedal. He pointed out what millions were already thinking. You can't cry racism every time you feel pressure. You can't weaponize identity to shield yourself from criticism, especially not when you're benefiting from the very system you're complaining about. And this wasn't just about Griner's feelings. It was about the fans, the people buying tickets, showing up, wearing jerseys, bringing their kids. These aren't villains. They're the reason the WNBA is growing. They're the reason players are making more money, and Griner turned around and painted them as a threat. That's not just disrespectful, it's destructive. Even some of her peers started going quiet. No flood of support, no mass defense, because deep down, they knew this wasn't a winning battle. There's a difference between calling out real injustice and making everything about yourself, and Griner blurred that line beyond recognition. And here's the irony. In trying to call out toxic fan behavior, she became the distraction. Her own comments created more chaos than any cheering crowd ever could. She did what critics have accused the WNBA of for years, turning real progress into grievance politics. Stephen A. didn't just call out the hypocrisy, he reminded the world of everything that's been given to Griner: the second chance, the diplomatic rescue, the global attention, and she used that platform not to uplift but to divide. That's why the criticism stuck. That's why the story didn't fade, because this wasn't a one-off misstep. It was a window into how some stars still don't get it. When the lights come on and the money flows in, you don't punch down on the fans who showed up. You rise to the moment, or you get left behind. While Brittney Griner's comments dominated the headlines, another story was quietly unfolding behind the scenes, maybe even more telling than the meltdown itself: the WNBA's absolute silence. It's hard to overstate how damaging that is. The league has spent decades fighting for relevance, begging for attention, pleading for respect. Now, with Caitlin Clark bringing record crowds, rating spikes, and mainstream buzz, the league finally has a spotlight. But instead of stepping up and leading through controversy, the WNBA vanished. That silence sent a message. When it comes to accountability, certain players are untouchable. Fans noticed, quickly, especially the new ones. Parents taking their kids to games, casual viewers tuning in for the first time. These aren't activists. These are regular people who want to enjoy sports without being labeled part of some cultural problem. They didn't sign up for politics. They came for basketball. But the league's unwillingness to set the record straight made it feel like the rules weren't being applied evenly. If any other player made those same comments, would they have been ignored? Or was this silence about protecting an image rather than protecting the game? What's worse is that the WNBA desperately needs this momentum to last. For the first time ever, teams are selling out arenas, jerseys are flying off shelves, ticket prices are rising, players are landing endorsement deals. And yet, instead of using this moment to build unity and strengthen their bond with fans, the league let one player hijack the narrative with divisive rhetoric and personal grievance. And here's where things get really complicated: the gender rumors. Once the controversy caught fire, the old theories about Griner's biological identity resurfaced, and the silence from the league only poured gasoline on that fire. Because whether the rumors are fair or not, people are asking, why has no one addressed them? Why is it taboo to ask basic questions about eligibility in women's sports, especially when biology matters so much in elite competition? The WNBA doesn't want to touch it, the media doesn't want to touch it, but fans are asking, and now that Stephen A. has openly acknowledged the topic, the floodgates are open. For a long time, Griner was a symbol of resilience. Her story, from rising college star to global professional athlete to surviving months in a Russian prison, was one of perseverance. She had public sympathy, she had media support, she had a platform that most athletes could only dream of. But what she's done with that platform lately has raised far more eyebrows than applause. By framing loud fan engagement as disruptive and suggesting that racial undertones were to blame, she didn't just spark outrage, she alienated the very people who have helped lift the WNBA to new heights. And it wasn't just what she said, it was when she said it. Caitlin Clark had just reignited national interest in women's basketball. Ticket sales were booming, attendance was up, sponsorships were rolling in. The league, for once, was getting mainstream attention, and Griner decided to make it about herself. Instead of seeing the rising energy in the crowd as a moment of progress, she interpreted it through a lens of suspicion and grievance. That choice told fans everything they needed to know about where her priorities are. And in today's world of professional sports, fans remember that. They hold on to it. And when you burn that bridge, it's hard, sometimes impossible, to rebuild. Even worse, the damage isn't just to her own image, it's bleeding into the larger reputation of the league. Griner's comments opened the door for critics to bring up topics that had previously stayed in the shadows, most notably the long circulating claims about her biological identity. And once those rumors re-emerged, the conversation shifted yet again, from fan behavior to fairness, from race to regulation, from free speech to eligibility. These aren't just internet trolls fueling the fire. These are everyday fans asking basic questions. Is the league being transparent? Are all athletes being held to the same standards? Are there eligibility protocols in place that ensure fairness? Or is it all based on public image and narrative control? The silence surrounding those questions only makes the speculation louder. Griner, instead of addressing concerns directly or showing any kind of reflection, responded emotionally. She lashed out at critics, dismissed opposing viewpoints, and positioned herself as the victim of a coordinated attack. But that strategy didn't land this time, because when someone has been given every opportunity, every advantage, and even a diplomatic rescue on the world stage, it becomes difficult to sell yourself as the oppressed voice in the room. Stephen A. Smith's criticism hit so hard not because it was loud, but because it was accurate. He didn't accuse her of anything personal. He didn't attack her identity. He simply reminded everyone of the facts. Griner was saved from one of the most dangerous prisons in the world, traded for a convicted international arms dealer, and welcomed back to the US as a hero. And now she's publicly complaining about fans being excited to watch her play. That kind of contradiction doesn't sit well with the average viewer. It breaks the unspoken bond between athlete and audience. Gratitude, effort, and authenticity in exchange for loyalty, passion, and support. Once that bond is broken, it's not just one player's reputation on the line, it's the entire brand of the league. And that's the real cost of this controversy. It's not just about Brittney Griner anymore. It's about how much trust the WNBA is willing to sacrifice to protect certain narratives. It's about whether this league wants to grow into a respected sports institution, or remain a platform where accountability is optional. If there's one thing this moment has revealed, it's that the audience is watching more closely than ever. They're not just celebrating the highlights, they're paying attention to the character, the messaging, and the integrity behind the scenes. Griner had the chance to be part of something historic, something bigger than herself. Instead, she's now known as the one who tried to derail the moment with division and denial. That legacy won't be easily rewritten, and for the WNBA, the question is no longer whether they'll recover from this, but whether they'll learn from it before the spotlight moves on.